So last night's debate was full of important and defining moments. Almost every second of that debate showed just an unbelievable contrast between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So much so that choosing just one moment to focus on is sort of impossible. But if you had to pick one moment to show an undecided voter, it might be this question to Donald Trump on the issue of health care.
9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan.
Concepts of a plan? It's kind of like when you ask a high school student if they started their book report and they tell you they have an idea of how they're going to write it. The difference between a high schooler and Donald Trump is, of course, that Donald Trump has been attacking the Affordable Care Act for nearly a decade now, but he still has no idea what he wants to replace it with a decade later. That alone is really something, especially when you consider the double standard that has existed and still exists for these two candidates heading into last night's debate. For weeks, these have been the headlines written about Vice President Harris. Harris's early campaign, heavy on buzz, light on policy. Kamala Harris has good vibes, time for some good policies. Kamala Harris' campaign is light on policy, but that's helped her transform the race. Now, the reality is that since she entered the race about, 5 minutes ago, Kamala Harris has laid out a series of policy proposals in speeches and on her website. Economic policies on housing and price gouging, health care policies on restoring reproductive freedom and lowering drug prices, family policies on affordable child care. So if that is the definition of light on policy, then the Trump campaign is, what is less than zero? The policy page for the Trump website lists a series of vague campaign promises, which are not policies, like end inflation and seal the border, with no explanation as to how Trump plans to accomplish any of it. In fact, the only detailed policy proposal Trump's allies have put forward is Project 2025, and Trump spent most of this campaign running away from that plan. Here he was last night.
As you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it.
Going into this debate, the onus was on Kamala Harris to deliver specifics, even though Donald Trump has spent much of this campaign just talking about sharks and the late, great Hannibal Lecter, who was never actually alive to begin with. But as it turned out, last night, Donald Trump did not have the luxury of just glossing over what he might actually do if he becomes president again. And that led to a series of very revealing moments, like this question on abortion.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. in all fairness.
Trump just refused to say whether he would veto a national abortion ban, a question he had to know was coming in this debate. It was the same thing on foreign policy, like when Trump was asked this question about which side he supports in the war in Ukraine.
I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives.
Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
By contrast, Vice President Harris spent the night, on one hand, baiting Trump, while also letting people know where she stands on key issues. Here she is explaining her position on abortion.
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country?
And here was Harris responding to Trump on Ukraine while also making a direct appeal to critical swing state voters.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
The choice between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris could not have been clearer. And now the question is, did last night have any impact on the voters who are going to decide this election, and especially those of them who said going into this debate that they wanted to hear more specifics from Kamala Harris? This debate may be the first and last time voters see these two candidates debate side by side in a national forum. So, what did they think?
If you're sure you're going to vote for Trump, raise your hand.
Sure is a strong word. If I had to vote now, right now, today, I'd vote for Trump.
Okay.
Same thing here, yeah.
Okay. Harris, if you had to vote today, raise your hand. And you just want to know more, Bonnie?
I want to know more.
And Nicole's not going to vote for either.
Who do you think won, by show of hands, former President Trump? I'll give it 4, but tentative. 2 over there. What about Vice President Harris? More hands?
Is there anything you heard here that you thought, oh, yeah, I could go for that policy? I could stand with that candidate?
Not really. For me, I think Kamala had a good debate. I feel more favorably towards her than to Donald.
But I'm still not sure.
Not 100%.
Joining me now are George Conway, attorney and staff writer for The Atlantic, Tim Alberta. His latest piece for the magazine is entitled Why Mike Lee Folded. And we are going to get into the Republican Party and the fold. George, let me start with you first, just about your impressions about this debate and the degree to which you think it really shaped the dynamics of the closing days of this election.
Well, I think it can't help but do that, because I think we're going to keep seeing clips of Donald Trump saying the absurd things that he was saying yesterday. I mean, there's just so much that he does that is just a wall of words, a random waterfall of just verbiage that there were so many things in there that he said that are just completely absurd, not just the cats and the people eating cats in Ohio, allegedly. I mean, he said that he was a leader in fertilization. What is that? What is he even talking about there? I mean, it was just, I mean, the montages that I think people are going to be that the campaign will be able to put together and other people can be able to put together about all the foolish things and the exaggerated things and the apocalyptic things that he was saying. I mean, the more he was pressured, the more he talked about how it's the end of the world if I'm not elected and this will happen. And the exaggerations just make him look silly. And if you stack them all together, and I think that's what we're going to do, that's what people are going to remember. It's going to be brutal for him.
I do wonder, Tim, you know, it's not, of course, just Donald Trump who's going to have to answer for some of the things he said last night, whether that's potentially siding with Vladimir Putin in the war in Ukraine, maybe enacting a national abortion ban. I mean, this is stuff that any Republican on a ticket in November is going to have to talk about. And your magnum opus in The Atlantic talks about the concessions that formerly skeptical members of the party have made in order to gain power and relevance within today's, you know, Trump-owned GOP. I sort of wonder, you know, as you tell the story of Mike Lee, how you think that story, you know, changes or doesn't change based on a performance like the one last night from Donald Trump, and just, you know, how difficult it is for those Republicans who still have a conscience but haven't disavowed Trump.
Well, Alex, it's interesting. I spent the day talking with a number of people close to Trump, close to the campaign, and, you know, the way that they sort of play this off is, well, we're sort of back to where we were a year ago, which is that this is a coin flip, and it's going to come down to, you know, 100,000 voters spread across maybe 12 counties in 3 or 4 states, and that's that. But if you compare that to where the Trump campaign was just 3 months ago, which is they were, I think, pretty comfortably closing in on 320, 325 electoral votes, and Democrats down the ballot in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, elsewhere were in serious trouble. This feels like an entirely new campaign. It feels like a tale of two campaigns in many ways. And so it's interesting that when we were in Milwaukee this summer, when really it felt like this was the high watermark for Trump, for the Republican Party, they were all sort of on cruise control and on cloud nine, feeling like this was turning into a wave election for them. You felt this unity. It was a party that for the first time really in a decade felt entirely coalesced around Donald Trump. No reservations, no dissenters. It was all MAGA all the time. And what's interesting is that now, when you're dealing with this sort of reset that we're seeing specific to not just last night, but specific to, I'd say, the last 2 or 3 weeks of the campaign, with the numbers really leveling out and the Trump campaign showing some real signs of fatigue here. Some of those same Republicans who felt really good a couple of months ago and who were all on board, they are not anymore. And you can hear it in their voice. You can sense that they recognize that even if Trump's numbers don't suffer much or don't even suffer at all, I mean, look, we're living in a very polarized electorate, and as bad as he was last night, I think there's a very realistic possibility that the numbers stay pretty steady in the days to come. But that's because of Trump's perceived strengths and weaknesses already being so baked into the minds of so many millions of voters. But what about those down ballot Republicans? Do they suffer as a result of this? And I think that is the fear among a lot of Republicans, that Trump's numbers are going to remain pretty stable no matter what, but that among moderates, among independents, that they suffer when he has a performance like the one he did last night.
Yeah, it seemed to me, George, I don't know if you saw it this way, but Kamala Harris was trying to embarrass Trump, not just for the benefit of Democrats to rile them up and get them to the polls, but also embarrassing him in the eyes of moderate voters and maybe even moderate Republicans. Jonathan V. Last writes in the on the Bulwark the degree to which she just was laser focused on issues that resonate with those sort of old guard Republican centrists. From the opening question, Harris talked about her support for family formation, which is a conservative talking point, her recognition of the importance of small businesses, a key Republican constituency. She emphasized tax cuts. She was hawkish on Russia and China. She offered unwavering commitment to Israel. She talked about being a gun owner. You know, the list goes on. I thought that was pretty targeted messaging. Do you think it resonates, George?
Yeah, I think it does, because I think the only substantive argument when Trump makes it is that somehow Kamala Harris is too liberal for the country. That's the only substantive argument he has, and he, he'll try to bring in immigration or taxes and things like that, and she just tacked right to the center, and she basically took. This was the same thing that happened in the convention, where they basically took over the flag. I mean, Donald Trump spends all his time trashing on America, not offering a vision for the future. It's a very negative, dystopian view of the country, and she is. She's speaking positively about the country, and not about the government, but about the people in the country, about the ability of people, maybe with a little help from the government or with a little less interference from the government, being able to accomplish things for themselves and for their families and small businesses and so on. This is this classic American presidential politics. It's normal. And that's the contrast that she was trying to and successfully drew with Donald Trump. And then she'd say, and then watch the other guy's rallies where he talks about Hannibal Lecter, and of course, he goes off and chases the rabbit. Yeah. It was beautiful, though, the transitions that she made back and forth between putting together a positive vision, introducing herself to the public that haven't focused on her, and then contrasting herself with him, and then just giving the side eye was so powerful. Okay, she didn't overdo it. She just looked at this man the way we all look at him. It's like, what is his frickin' problem? What's he even talking about? But she did it in such a controlled fashion. I mean, it was the split screen, I think, at the end of the day, that destroyed Trump, not just the words that he used and the words that she used, because we know what we've heard them say a lot of these things before, but the split screen, and that's what actually hurt Biden last time. The split screen was him. He had this blank look on his face. It mattered a lot.
Tim, I agree with both of you guys that, A, that was kind of a masterclass in debating on the part of Kamala Harris, and that at the same time, who knows whether it actually moves the people it needs to move, right? We played that sound from those undecided voters because it's kind of this mixed bag of people who are like, yeah, maybe I'm still for Trump, or I think I'm for Harris, and there's so much indecision. And you have to wonder, is the reluctance to vote for Harris when you see such a contrast because of her policy, or is it something deeper and more personal, like the fact that she is a woman or that she's a mixed race, woman of color? Is it something cultural? Is it something personal that she herself can't actually manage, that she can't message, that no ad will fix, no debate will fix, but it's a decision that these voters have to come to on their own?
Well, look, it's hard to say. I think the one thing that we have to recognize is that the fundamentals of this campaign largely remain unchanged despite everything else in this campaign being turned on its head, right? We've had an assassination attempt. We've had the incumbent president pushed out of the way and his vice president elevated to the top of the ticket in a historic sort of intra-party maneuver. And yet, when you look at the polling from 18 months ago, when you look at it from 12 months ago, 6 months ago to today, most of the core concerns voters have remain pretty much unchanged. And so if voters were punishing Joe Biden for the perception of being weak on the economy, if they were punishing Joe Biden for the perception of being weak on immigration and crime, if they were punishing Joe Biden for the idea that the geopolitics is a mess and that the country, the world rather, is burning all around us, well, then it sort of makes sense that some of those same concerns, some of those same criticisms would translate to his vice president. Now, clearly not all of them have, because she's polling significantly better than Biden was. But, I live in the Midwest. I live in a battleground state. I'm traveling constantly to Wisconsin, to PA, talking to people in Michigan. A lot of what you pick up, and also when you talk to party officials on both sides, what you pick up is that, she's an improvement from Biden just in the fact that she is younger, she's telegenic, she's articulate, she can put a sentence together. But she's still such an unknown, Alex. And I think one debate doesn't necessarily address that. And it's not to minimize the issues you're raising, because we know that those issues are real and they are resonant with voters and that they move the needle to some degree. I also just think that, she campaigned as Joe Biden's vice president during the COVID election where, the campaign was sort of under wraps. She never really had a true introduction to the American people. And then the beginning of her term as vice president was pretty rocky, and they kind of reeled her back in. So really, this is someone who is still doing the hard work of introducing herself to a lot of voters. And I think the good news for Democrats is that to the degree that she has become better known, her favorables have gone up. But I think the bad news for Democrats is that this is still a very condensed window in which they're trying to make that introduction. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing from some voters is, look, we can't stand Donald Trump. He's repellent, and yet I think he's going to be better on these 2 or 3 core issues I care about. Therefore, I will vote for him again.
Right, his economic policy, and I'm not even sure what the other one is. George Conway and Tim Alberta, thank you guys very much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. We have a lot more to get to tonight. Of all the traps Kamala Harris set for Donald Trump, there is one that could decide the election. I'm going to talk to Mini Timaraju about that coming up. But first, did you hear? There was a lot of winning last night. Donald Trump won so much, according to Donald Trump, that he got tired of winning. The only problem is he can't debate Kamala Harris ever again. I'll talk to Senator Elizabeth Warren about that coming up next.
I've been told I'm a good debater. I think it was one of my better debates, maybe my best debate.
We won the debate according to every poll, every single poll. I think that, are we going to do a rematch? I just don't know. When you win, you don't really necessarily have to do it a second time, so we'll see.
Whatever Donald Trump thinks about his debate performance, multiple instant polls showed Vice President Harris won the debate by a large margin, including this one that shows her beating Trump 63 to 37%. Even 30% of Trump supporters said Harris won the night, a figure Donald Trump may not be all that familiar with. Joining me now is Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator Warren, I'm eager to hear, just your initial reaction to what transpired on that debate stage last night. I know you were watching it. What did you think?
Yes. Kamala Harris will be president of the United States. That's what we saw last night. She strode out on that stage like a president, like a leader. She took his hand. She owned Donald Trump from literally the first seconds of the debate. And she did everything but, snap a leash on him and walk that old dog around the stage. But what you really saw was Kamala Harris as president. She's the one. I watched her as she did this, and I thought, boy, I'm ready for her to take on, Republican crazies in Congress. I'm ready for her to stand up and really lean in on the Wall Street CEOs who think they can run everything. I'm ready for her to take on Vladimir Putin and to take on Kim Jong-un. That's what she showed. She showed that kind of strength and presence that wasn't forced. It wasn't like, I need to look like this. It's that it came from within. She was strong. She was composed. She was presidential.
I wonder, because you guys were Senate colleagues, I was reminded of some of her almost prosecutorial lines of questioning during Senate confirmation hearings. And I kind of wonder if you saw flashes of that, the Kamala Harris you worked with in the Senate on the stage last night, and whether that's kind of the new playbook for dealing with Donald Trump.
I did, and it's something, actually, I've known Kamala 14 years now. It's something I actually watched when she would get into it back when she was Attorney General for California. And you may remember, it's after the financial crash, and here she is trying to help the families that these banks have cheated, and now the banks are trying to take away their homes. And I watched her as we went through some of these negotiations. I was trying to set up the CFPB at the same time. She gets a calmness and a focus, and it shows she knows what she's doing. She's well prepared, and most of all, she knows who she's fighting for. I thought that was a big contrast last night. Donald Trump, once again, all about Donald Trump. Kamala Harris was all about your family, all about what's happening to America's working families, to America's middle class, what's happening to women who are now, 1 in 3 in America lives in a state that effectively bans abortion. 1 in 3 live in a state where when they walk into a hospital in the middle of a miscarriage, are examined, doctor knows what needs to be done, but says, sorry, you're not close enough to death yet for me to give you the medical care you need. Go out to the parking lot and hemorrhage for a few more hours. That doctors in these states are afraid of being criminally prosecuted. You see Kamala Harris as the person who will lead us and say, this is not the America we want to be, and it is not the America we will be. There is exactly one way to protect our daughters and our granddaughters going forward, and that is a federal law to put Roe versus Wade in place. And that's what Kamala Harris is going to sign into law. That's the kind of thing we saw last night, that leadership, that she is strong, she is determined, and she will fight for us.
And she knows how to trigger Donald Trump better than anybody else in American politics.
And that's the part we have to remember. 55 days, we have to approach this with joy, with entertainment, passing around the memes, having a good time, but doing the work for 55 days. And that means volunteering and knocking on doors and texting and making sure that your cousins have all registered to vote and that everyone has a plan to vote, and we early vote wherever is possible. We've got 55 days to deliver this. We have the right candidate at the right moment. It's up to the rest of us now. Let's do the work.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still ahead tonight, Donald Trump's great service, his words, not mine, his great service to the American public in overturning Roe v. Wade. Mini Timaraju joins me to talk about that coming up next. During last night's debate, when Donald Trump was asked about his role in overturning Roe v. Wade, Trump essentially told America, "You're welcome."
I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. We've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states.
Here's how Vice President Harris responded to that.
You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care, they don't want that.
Joining me now is Mini Timaraju, President and CEO of Reproductive Freedom for All. Mini, thank you for joining me tonight. So Amanda Becker is a reporter for the 19th. And she tweeted yesterday night that Google Analytics email that she received showed that abortion was the top searched issue in every single state other than Ohio, where Trump said they're eating cats and dogs during the debate. That, to me, says the abortion thing resonated in last night's debate.
I mean, yeah, look, Trump took a completely straightforward question and turned it into a completely unhinged rant. I tried to go back and watch it over and over again today to make sure I could understand what he was saying. And let's be candid, it was very hard to understand what he was saying. But what I thought was really smart of the vice president is she was able to sort of dissect. Yeah. This is the misinformation. This is the hate. This is where you don't show compassion. And then let me shame you, and then let me talk directly to the American people. Mm-hmm. And that's when you see the Google Analytics. I'm so glad Amanda tweeted it. We know this issue is salient. The New York Times just wrote a report based on their polling that for women 40 and under, it's becoming the top issue over the economy, and it's trending across all demographics. So you're seeing the analytics, you're seeing the data, you're seeing the polling. The important thing that needed to happen last night was Kamala Harris needed to nail him on this.
Yeah.
And she needed to draw the contrast, and she did it.
She did something, and I totally agree with Jessica Valenti on this, who's like the best, abortion journalist,
yes,
such as it is in the country. And she made this point. She said, Harris did something that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. She reclaimed family values on abortion. When Harris spoke about the real people impacted by these laws, it wasn't just a refusal to allow Trump to frame the conversation, but a reminder that we, as in the Democrats, are the ones protecting American families. It's been a long time, maybe since never, that you could frame the issue of choice with family values. And I thought she did it masterfully.
I don't know that we've ever seen this, like a full 10 minutes on, national television on abortion and reproductive freedom. And she brought those stories to the national stage. And this is something, it's an untold story about Kamala Harris. Since the Dobbs decision, she spent the last 2 years traveling this country, meeting with these women, meeting with their doctors, the first vice president to visit a Planned Parenthood, digging in deep with state and local legislators and attorneys general to figure this out, rolling up her sleeves. And it all paid off last night.
I got to ask, because, we're looking at this polling. The day after the debate question is it going to make a difference? What happens now? We were talking about undecided voters. Simon Rosenberg, the Democratic strategist, says, yes, these polls are tight.
Yeah.
But the difference is Dobbs. The difference is the fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned. That changed the dynamics of the 2022 midterms. The polling has consistently overvalued Republican votes, undervalued progressive Democratic support and motivation. I mean, when you look at the state of Pennsylvania, where there's Donald Trump was behind Joe Biden by 4.3 points in 2020. He and Kamala Harris are neck and neck this year, right? Do you think abortion is the difference maker for Democrats who are nervous about this election cycle being, already much tighter than 2020.
Yeah, I mean, look, even when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket, we were saying abortion was going to be the difference maker. We did research that showed for voters who were very frustrated with Joe Biden, particularly on the Middle East, we were able to motivate them and move them on abortion. That included 18 to 35-year-olds and women. So, and what's interesting, our friend Tom Bonnier, who works a lot with Simon, has been really tracking voter registration numbers and has been talking about a surge in voter registration data with women, but particularly younger women and women of color. And we're seeing really record numbers in these battleground states. So, yeah, I mean, I think the issue gets more salient the longer these bans are in place. But with Kamala Harris, you have an authenticity, but a renewed energy around it. And you have a shrinking of the believability gap of what Democrats can and will do about it.
Right, totally. And it's helped by Donald Trump going through a list of states that have had abortion referenda on their ballots. Ohio, Kansas.
A little too liberal for him in Ohio.
Yeah. Just reminding people that these are issues that are being decided at the state level. And, oh, by the way, when they're decided, Democrats usually win. I mean, that's still occurring and will be occurring this November, too.
10 states. I want to mention something he said, though, that I think I actually want to dig into a little bit more with my team. He kept talking about how we don't need Congress for this. She's not going to get Congress for this. Look at Project 2025. They plan to get a national abortion ban through without Congress. I thought it was a huge slip up for him. He was basically admitting on national television, yes, I'm excited that I did this. And by the way, I don't need Congress, and she doesn't need Congress. We're going to do this by enforcing the Comstock Act. So, I mean, it was a big tell for us.
Insofar as you could decipher anything.
I mean, I watched it like 5 times. It might have broken my brain.
Listen, that's your job, my friend. Mini Timaraju, it's great to hear your perspective on all this.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate your time. It's great to see you in person.
Good to see you.
Coming up, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Actually, they're not. That's next.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
Maybe Donald Trump's most offensive and also disgusting lie last night was about Haitian immigrants in the town of Springfield, Ohio.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris.
The claims that Trump is making about Springfield, Ohio, are provably false. But he and his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, are lying anyway. Now, lies are not good to begin with, but there is a particularly pernicious aspect to these ones. These are real people that they are lying about. The child that J.D. Vance claims was murdered by a Haitian immigrant. We've blurred the photos here, but the gist is that the Trump campaign is using the accidental death of an 11-year-old in a car accident to try and claim that Haitian immigrants are killers. Here was the father of that 11-year-old speaking to the Springfield City Council yesterday.
I wish that my son, Aiden Clark, was killed by a 60-year-old white man. I bet you never thought anyone would ever say something so blunt. But if that guy killed my 11-year-old son, the incessant group of hate-spewing people would leave us alone. We have to get up here and beg them to stop. Using Aiden as a political tool is, to say the least, reprehensible for any political purpose. And speaking of morally bankrupt, politicians Bernie Moreno, Chip Roy, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump, they have spoken my son's name and used his death for political gain. This needs to stop now.
There is a massive disconnect between the story that Trump and Vance are telling about Springfield and what's happening in Springfield in reality. The truth is that for decades, Springfield was a city in decline. Manufacturing plants shuttered, the population plummeted, and so the city tried to attract new businesses and workers. And that effort worked. New jobs and cheap rents attracted thousands of new workers, including thousands of Haitian immigrants. And to be certain, a large influx of people comes with real challenges, both for the immigrants and the city that welcomes them. But by most accounts, the influx of Haitians to Springfield has been a pretty positive thing.
The Haitians that I know, these Haitians right here in this middle row, my people that I've known for 4 years going on, they're beautiful, wonderful people. They're engineers, electrical. They're highly educated people that own businesses.
My colleague Yamiche Alcindor sat down with the president of Springfield's Haitian Community Center today, and here's how he described how that community is feeling right now.
They are scared for their lives. Some of them are asking me, even yesterday I got a friend calling me asking me if he has to leave because he's scared for his life.
And then there's the assertion that these immigrants are here illegally, which is flatly not true. But there is a big, dark reason why Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are pushing that specific lie, and it has to do with our elections. I'm going to discuss what's going on there with Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson coming up next.
Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
Donald Trump's lies about fraudulent elections are having an impact. Nearly 1 in 6 election workers received threats of violence after the 2020 election, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. Joining me now is Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who testified today before Congress about the threats ahead of this November's election. Secretary Benson, it's great to see you. There's been a lot of dangerous things Donald Trump has said in recent days and weeks and years, but his lies last night about illegal, undocumented migrants coming in and a concerted effort to get them to vote fraudulently. What was your reaction when you heard him say that?
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Alex. It was really kind of a gut punch because it's not true. I mean, only U.S. citizens can vote in our elections. But what this type of rhetoric is designed to do is, one, create fear and stoke fear, obviously, and division. But secondly, also start to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of American citizens that our elections are anything other than secure and accurate, which they are. And then also to really set the stage to potentially try to challenge and overturn legitimate, fair, and accurate election results should he be unhappy with them come November. So it was really a harbinger of what could come and what's to come in the weeks ahead, and really in my view, a signal that we've all got to buckle up and try to rise above the noise and focus on the facts, which is that only U.S. citizens can vote in our elections.
Yeah, and it's hardly, without parallel. He's been saying stuff in recent days that should be ringing everybody's alarm. There was this Truth Social post he made on the 7th of September that said that there was rampant cheating in the 2020 election and that individuals who cheated will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, including election officials. I mean, the threats here are twofold, right? They're the threats against the undocumented migrants, which is part of his immigration portfolio. There is the threats to those who carry out the elections, election workers, and those who certify them, elections officials. From your vantage point, how much of a chilling effect is this having on the recruitment of people to work the polls and also those who are tasked with, certifying the elections and making sure state elections are run smoothly?
Yeah, well, it's essentially having two effects. One, there are people who are throwing up their hands and saying, you know what, it's not worth it. I want to stay home, and this isn't something where I want to put my family's life in jeopardy simply to just protect our election results. But actually, the vast majority of election officials in Michigan and across the country have seen this also as an opportunity to double down on our commitment to being professional, bipartisan, and ensuring transparent and secure elections continue to be the rule of the land. And so we've also seen an incredible emboldening of election officials who, yes, these are threats, and these are threats designed to intimidate us out of doing our duty and our jobs as election officials. But the vast majority of us have stepped into the fray knowing that after 2020, this is what we're signing up for, and we're ready. We're ready to stand guard and refuse to be intimidated. We won't back down, and we will protect every voice, every vote, regardless of how that vote is cast or who it's cast for, because we believe in democracy, and frankly believe anyone running for office in this country should similarly believe in the truth and the facts and our election officials and stand with them instead of threatening them.
You know, and for people who don't understand what you personally have faced and are facing, your house has been swatted. You have received death threats. There is a Michigan lawmaker who has said you definitively will be prosecuted if Donald Trump wins again in 2024. I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of tenacity and resilience that's demanded of you and anyone else in your position. And how do you grapple with that? I mean, because of course it's not just you, it's also your family and the people around you.
Yeah, I mean, it is alarming and it is chilling, I mean, frankly, to just know that these powerful individuals with great megaphones, former president of the United States, would use that platform, his ambitions, to try to threaten us for simply just doing our jobs. And to know also, you know, I started my career investigating extremist groups and extreme leaders, and we know that that false, vitriolic, violent rhetoric often does result in threats and violence or worse against the people who are the targets. And so we realize the challenge moment that we're in, but we also realize our responsibility. These threats are ultimately not threats to us. They're threats to the American people. They're threats to the will of the voters and our democracy itself. And I'm proud to stand in the breach every day, and I know my colleagues are as well, because we embrace our responsibility to protect that basic promise of fair elections for our country, and will continue to defend the results of the elections, whatever they may be, this fall. And so that's really our message to the president. You can come at us with all the threats you want, and yes, it does create a harrowing environment for us to work through. But at the same time, we will not be deterred from doing our job with pride to protect the voice and votes of every citizen in this country.
Man, just a profile in courage. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, thank you on behalf of people interested in democracy. Thanks for your time tonight as well.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
That is our show for this evening. Now it is time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, my friend.
Good evening, Alex. And you know,